throughout the day and use only the water that is needed. Find ways to save water from appliances to landscaping at tampabaywater.org/savewater.
You tune in to WUSF for all your favorite NPR shows. And for a list of when you can hear them, visit WUSF.org. WUSF is your spot for local, on air and online.
We live in a populous state, but our booming human population is putting the squeeze on our animal neighbours, like the endangered Florida panther. A network of busy highways makes it tough for panthers, bears and other critters to get around, so engineers are working on a solution, an overpass over I-4 just for animals. I'm Matthew Petty, and ahead on Florida Matters Live and Local, we'll discuss what it's going to take to get the state's first animal overpass off the ground. Also this hour, have you ever posted something snarky on social media and instantly regretted it? The FBI wants you to think before you post. And coming up, you'll hear how they assess online threats. And if you've got questions about what counts as a threat and how to be smart and safe online, call us 813-755-6562 or email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. And if you've got fond memories of the mosh pit, stick around for a conversation with a professor of punk as we dive into the swamp of Gainesville's punk music culture. That's coming up. First, these headlines.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Tributes abound today for the Reverend Jesse Jackson. His family says Jackson, who battled progressive supranuclear palsy, died this morning. Jackson is being remembered as a protege of the late Martin Luther King Jr., who would continue to be a powerful force against racism and discrimination. He was also a powerful political force, one who paved the way for other African American leaders, such as the nation's first African American president, Barack Obama. Jackson was a two-time presidential candidate in 1984 and again 4 years later, where he delivered a speech at the Democratic National Convention that ended with this iconic refrain.
Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive.
The Reverend Jesse Jackson, he was 84 years old. A second round of nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran has ended in Geneva, both sides entrenched on key issues ahead of the negotiations, which took place amid a U.S. military buildup in the Middle East. Here's NPR's Jackie Northam.
The indirect talks were between Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner on the U.S. side and Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Speaking afterwards, Araghchi said the 3-hour talks had made good progress and were more constructive than earlier negotiations, but that more work needed to be done. The U.S. has so far not commented on the talks. President Trump is firm that Iran possessed no nuclear weapons, and so zero enrichment. Tehran insists it has the right to enrich uranium for research and civilian purposes, but has indicated it's willing to curb its nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. It's unclear if or when another round of talks is scheduled. Jackie Northam, NPR News.
Now to the Winter Olympics, which offers a full spectrum of athleticism from figure skating to curling. But as NPR's Jonathan Lambert tells us, one sport may have the best athletes, at least by one scientific measure.
For an athlete to work hard, their muscle cells need oxygen. The more oxygen they can get, the harder they can go. Scientists call the maximum amount of oxygen an athlete can use during exercise VO2 max. Scientists have measured VO2 max across all kinds of athletes, and cross-country skiers consistently rank towards the top. Stephen Seiler, an exercise physiologist at the University of Agder, explains why.
Cross-country skiing is the only sport that we're standing upright and we're using all 4 limbs at the same time.
That means their cardiovascular systems are working overtime to fuel all those muscles and fight gravity because they're upright. Years of this training can push a skier's VO2 max towards its upper limits. Jonathan Lambert, NPR News.
The Dow is up 53 points at last check at 49,554. It's NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Charles Schwab, offering investors choices like full-service wealth management, advice, investing, and trading on Thinkorswim. Learn more at schwab.com. And from the Doris Duke Foundation.
You're listening to WUSF 89.7. I'm Craig Kopp. A House subcommittee approved a plan to give the USF Sarasota Manatee campus to New College, along with $53 million in debt. Orlando Representative Anna Escamani spoke against the idea.
I don't think it's smart to move not just these assets, but also, of course, the debt to New College, because unless we're paying off that debt, which is likely going to happen in a future legislature, I feel like it's fiscally responsible to do that.
The House bill would also hand $22 million from USF's pot of state money to New College. That drew a reaction from USF's Board of Trustees Chair Will Weatherford. In a letter to the USF community after the vote, Weatherford said taking $22 million away from the USF would threaten its ability to pay for students and faculty at the campus as students finish their degrees. The Senate has not introduced a bill on the campus transfer. And a note here, WUSF has studios at USF Tampa and USF Sarasota Manatee, but is editorially independent, and its news stories are not reviewed by university leaders prior to air. Pinellas County employees are seeing promising results from an oyster reef they installed in Old Tampa Bay a few years ago. Mesh bags filled with loose shells create a ring shape off Philippi Park in Safety Harbor. Environment Program Manager Stacy Day says oysters are growing like crazy out there.
So it's really exciting to see, and each adult oyster can filter a lot of water, up to 50 gallons a day.
And they've noticed more seagrasses growing on the backside of the reef. The oyster ring was put to the test during the 2024 storms, and Day says it didn't move at all.
The road was completely covered with sand and water. They lost a lot of pine trees. But this reef here did help kind of break up some of that wave energy. So without that being there, we might have seen more trees lost, just because the waves would have been more powerful.
As part of an in-service day for the county yesterday, employees placed bags of recycled oyster shells on the shoreline to continue to harden it. I'm Craig Kopp, WUSF 89.7 News.
From the 1920s through the early 1970s, thousands of American Jews found community in the Catskill Mountains.
The Borscht Belt was the preeminent vacation destination, but also center of cultural renaissance for American Jewry.
A new exhibit at the Florida Holocaust Museum documents the stories of the Borscht Belt. I'm Kathy Carter. You'll hear more today on All Things Considered on WUSF 89.7, your spot for local.
This is Florida Matters Live and Local, sponsored by Badawi Law and broadcasting from the doctors Lorraine Rubis and Neil Frankel studio at WUSF in Tampa. I'm Matthew Petty. Last Thursday, Polk County Planning Group rejected a planned truck refueling stop at the location of a key wildlife corridor crossing, under State Road 33. And that wildlife crossing is near an overpass that is under construction for animals to cross I-4. It will be the state's first overpass built just for animals. Now, it was slated to be developed for service trucks, but extensive wetlands on the property caused Polk County's Development Review Committee to deny the plan. WSF's Steve Newborn has been covering the wildlife corridor. He joins us now to talk about this new development. Steve, thanks for stopping by.
Hey, my pleasure, Matthew.
I want to hear from you too. If you share concerns about how Florida's wildlife can stay protected while coexisting with humanity here in the Sunshine State, you can join the conversation. 813-755-6562. Maybe you've had a run-in with an animal on or around one of these busy highways, a bear or a deer or a panther even, perhaps. Give us a call, 813-755-6562. Now, Steve, you've talked with people about the importance of building a wildlife connector over I-4, especially after the interstate's construction disrupted the established wildlife.
I don't know how many people know the story of I-4. Construction on I-4 began in 1958, and I think it was completed in 1965, basically severing North and South Florida of any wildlife connectivity.
All right, so that's Marion Ryan talking about the kind of, disruption to wildlife there. Just to expand a little bit, what is it about these roads that have made it so difficult for animals to do their thing in Florida?
Well, if you've been on I-4, it's pretty hard for anybody to do their thing, even if you're on two legs trying to cross it.
Or driving, let alone that.
Right, even driving, right? So you can imagine what a little critter with four legs is going to come up against. The reason this spot is so significant is because there's kind of choke points in the wildlife corridor, which is kind of a connected or trying to connect preserved areas so animals can migrate and therefore have genetic diversity. This is one of the few areas between Orlando and Tampa that is still undeveloped enough where you can have the connectivity. So this overpass, this will be the state's first wildlife overpass specifically for wildlife over I-4. And they spent like $25 million building it. So you can tell DOT has a lot invested into it. And they were afraid that this truck refueling stop, which is kind of next to a big truck carrier building already, they're expanding, would disrupt the ability of wildlife to use it. And this is a critical linkage, is what they call them. There's choke points basically for wildlife. This connects the Green Swamp to the north, which is a major preserved area between Orlando and Tampa, to Tenorock, Saddle Creek, and then the Peace River Valley to the south. So it kind of connects the two ends of the state. This is one of the few areas where this can be done.
You were just paddling around in the Peace River not too long ago. I understand you've got another trip planned into the Green Swamp, right? So you were kind of hiking around places that you like to recreate as well as report on.
Yeah, right. No paddling this time. We'll be right camping up against the Withlacoochee River, but this is the headwaters, and it's a very small stream. I think actually the word Withlacoochee means little big river because it gets wide in the rainstorms and in the summertime and shrinks to about nothing here. So we're going to be hiking probably about 35, 40 miles and camping in several places. This is a real critical area for wildlife and for the state's hydrology.
Yep.
I mean, 4 rivers start there, so it's a really important site to preserve.
Yeah. Now, so let's just come back to the, how you can make a way for animals to get across a busy road, whether it's I-4, whether it's State Road 33 or anything else. So, you've already got this underpass under one of these roads. Why can't they just do the same for I-4? It'd be easier to dig a tunnel than build a bridge, right?
Right. So there are a couple of actual underpasses to the east. There's 2 between Daytona and Orlando. And there's actually one that I've been under. It's in Winter Haven, a few miles east of this location. And you go under there, and it's like being in a train station, right? The rumbling, the noise, the trucks, the bum, 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 that going on, and the motorcycles going across. It's going to scare the bejesus out of a lot of these little critters. They're not going to go through there.
Yeah, unless they're kind of acclimated to humanity.
Well, you can only be acclimated so far before you get run over, right? And so the overpass has like blind walls, like sound walls, like you see along the interstate now.
Oh, right. So like alongside developments, they'll have these kind of big kind of concrete walls to muffle the sound a wee bit.
Right. So they're not going to actually see these trucks and cars whizzing by at 65 miles an hour. And it's going to have nice little depictions of bears and panthers on it, but I don't think the wildlife really cares about that too much.
No, but the main point is it's for the actual animals. So an overpass, as you mentioned, it's quite expensive. How far along with the construction are they? Have they actually kind of built the thing?
It's still, the bones of it is still being built. Like I said, there's about $25 million. It's going to be, I think, completed later this year. It's the first of its kind. There are other overpasses in the state. One is over I-75. It's part of a cross-state greenway, but it's not made strictly for wildlife. It's for hikers and everything. So this is a new idea for Florida. Now, it's been replicated in other places before. I mean, I've been to a very famous one connects Banff National Park in Canada, a very famous wildlife refuge in the Rockies, and it's the width of a freeway.
Right.
And we have documented herds of elk going over this thing. It's covered in grass, so it looks natural and has fences to direct them onto it so they won't, run off and get run over. So it's not a new idea, but it's new to Florida.
Yeah, okay. We're talking with WSF's Steve Newborn about a wildlife overpass under construction over I-4. Wondering if you've seen animals using wildlife crossings elsewhere in Florida, because these crossings, not an overpass per se, but underpasses exist elsewhere in Florida. And maybe you've had a run-in with a wild animal around the highways. Are we doing enough to protect Florida's wild animals? You can join the conversation by calling 813-755-6562. You can also send us an email, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. All right, so tell us about the origin story of this wildlife overpass, because the kind of genesis of it goes back a few years, right?
Yeah, this goes back to around 2010. The guy by the name of Joe Guthrie, a bear biologist, he was he's working at Archbold Natural Preserve in Highlands County. He was tracking a bear. It had a collar on it. And it started out in Highlands County near where he was, and it kept going north and butting up against I-4. It kept kind of trying to get across. Maybe he smelled a female across I-4 in the Green Swamp and wanted to get across. Couldn't do it. And after about a week or so going up and back or up and down the interstate, he hightailed it back to, he went all the way down to Lake Okeechobee, 500 miles.
It's a lot of steps.
Yeah. So the origin of this, Joe became one of the three leaders of the original Florida Wildlife Corridor expedition. They traversed the state 1,000 miles twice to create public knowledge and publicize the need for a wildlife corridor. So I-4 is critical to the whole existence of the corridor, and now it's the biggest blockade there is. So projects like this are really critical.
Yeah. Okay. So the bear story, that's kind of like the genesis of the wildlife corridor, not just this overpass idea.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Got an email here from Suzanne, who writes, a third Florida panther death reported in 2026. This one in Polk County. The male panther rescued east of County Line Road, exit Interstate 4, most likely hit while trying to cross the busy highway. The panther was taken to Zoo Tampa, but due to the severity of his injuries, was humanely euthanized on Thursday. So that's January 29th. Yeah, so that's, and panthers are in short supply, right? These magnificent animals. I don't know if you've seen one in the wild yourself, but they're very rare.
Very few people have seen them. Even some of the wildlife trackers I've talked to have never seen them. Just through camera traps we have there, we know their existence. So yeah, Suzanne's right. There was, I think it was maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, there was a panther right near this that got run over. And about a year and a half ago in Pasco County, a juvenile panther was killed trying to cross I-75 to get across. So there is a need for this, not just over I-4, but just about every major highway that we have, because the traffic is just going to keep getting worse in the future, right?
Yeah, I will say the only animals I've seen off the highway, any highway, have been pigs, a lot of pigs, and deer. Sometimes you'll see their eyes kind of light up at night as you're driving by.
Oh, yeah, a lot of that. Those are probably the main animals that are expected to use this. Hopefully we'll get maybe a panther or two, even a bear. There aren't too many bear sightings around there, but, you can always hope.
So you're following some bills. Before we close out here, Steve, you're following some bills in this year's legislative session. Anything kind of pertinent to today's discussion?
Yeah, so the Florida Wildlife Corridor, which we've just been discussing, the Governor DeSantis proposed $115 million for Florida Forever, which is the main land buying program to protect the corridor. Well, things are going back and forth between the Senate and the House right now, and the state Senate has just called for only $35 million and nothing in the House budget.
Yeah.
It has to be some kind of reconciliation for there to be any kind of money. Now, there is money for other programs that would have conservation easements, for one, which pays ranchers and agriculture grove owners not to develop their land. There's money in the budget for that, but nothing right now is given for the Florida Forever or for the Florida Wildlife Corridor, which is really surprising.
It is surprising because we've seen from past years that the environment is very popular. In fact, it's kind of has bipartisan support when we think about the uproar over the potential of developing pickleball courts and the likes in some of our state parks. People said, absolutely not, no way to that.
Right. Yeah. That's that. If you want to get people, in a pickle in the state, you try to put pickleball courts on their state land, or hotels, or golf courses, which is what Governor DeSantis tried to do a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So one good bill going through the legislature right now would make any kind of sales or any kind of land deed changes more transparent. This came in response to all those moves and all those protests by a lot of people a couple of years ago when this was proposed.
Yeah, all right. So we do like a little bit of transparency here at WUSF. We've been speaking with Steve Newborn, covering the environment and politics for WUSF. Thank you so much.
Hey, my pleasure, Matthew.
Well, coming up next, we'll stick with the legislature. Florida's legislative session well underway. Stay with us to hear how they're balancing budgets, or at least trying to. That's when Florida Matters Live and Local continues. Stay with us.
Mike drove his family's long school bus-colored station wagon, the Enterprise, to college. It was a gas guzzler, but it got the job done. If your old car has lived a good long life but is ready to go to that parking lot in the sky, donate it to WUSF. That way, you can help WUSF get the job done by bringing fact-based news to your community. Find out more at WUSF.org.
The Perlman Music Program Suncoast welcomes the Ariel String Quartet back to Sarasota. This program includes music from Beethoven as well as Haydn's The Joke Quartet. Sunday, February 22nd at Holly Hall. Tickets at pmpsuncoast.org. Gulfside Healthcare Services has provided expert, compassionate care in hospice, palliative, and home health for over 35 years. Now serving Pinellas hospice patients. Call 800-561-4883 for information or visit gulfside.org.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. Florida lawmakers have one really important job during the legislative session, and that is to pass a budget. Now, the House and Senate have released their budgets, but there are some big differences between them. And to delve into that a little more, here's WSF's Douglas Soul with the Your Florida team. Douglas, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So the House budget is about $113.6 billion. The Senate has a proposed $115 billion budget. So there's a bit of daylight between the both of them, and they're also both lower than Governor DeSantis' proposed budget. What else have you noticed when you look at these different proposals?
There is a lot of daylight between those two budgets, which is, of course, notable when you think back to last legislative session, which was extended a month and a half because the chambers could not come to a deal. So the big question this week is the negotiations have commenced full scale. Is there going to be an extension of this session? We don't know yet. There are some gaps, not just in the overall budget funding, but in the individual priorities of the budget. Mm-hmm. For example, one topic of conversation and of controversy for that matter is the governor's emergency spending fund, which has gotten billions of dollars. Sorry, I've caught the Capitol crud, so bear
no
with
worries.
me here, Matthew.
It's going around. It's going around, Douglas.
Oh no, it's going around full scale in the Capitol as it does every session. Mm-hmm. But so the emergency spending plan fund the governor gets has gotten billions of dollars. It's largely been used for hurricanes, but especially in recent months, has been used for immigration enforcement.
Yeah.
Think alligator Alcatraz in the Everglades. And that's generated a lot of headlines. And the House still wants to put $100 million into that fund, mm-hmm. but that's still less than what the Senate wants to do, which is $250 million. But the Senate, while they want to put that money in with no guardrails, the House has apparently had enough and wants to add some guardrails, including a requirement that there is no spending for anything but natural disasters.
Actually, we've got a little bit of sound here from some of your reporting last week. As you point out, the Senate and the House kind of at odds here over this emergency fund. Here's Senate Democratic leader Lori Berman.
We all know that the fund has been used for purposes it shouldn't be used for, and that we need to have oversight. And this was the bare minimum.
All right, so Berman talking about the need for oversight there. It sounds like the House has actually kind of come to an agreement over what that oversight should be. So is this one of those rare occasions where you have lawmakers from both sides of the aisles, bearing in mind that it's a Republican supermajority, kind of agreeing on what they want, at least in the House?
Yeah, absolutely. One of those rare moments, especially with contentious measures such as this. Now, of course, Senate Republicans don't agree with Democrats, but the House Republicans, which, mind you, the House over the last year has been more willing to speak out against the governor. There's been a lot of adversarial tensions between the House Speaker, Danny Perez, and the governor. And I think, this is an extension of that dynamic where they're willing to speak out. Of course, one thing that's important to note to our listeners is Governor Ron DeSantis is term limited here very soon. This November, we're going to be picking our next governor. So the funding we're talking about doesn't just implicate the current administration, but the next one as well.
Yeah, okay. So, it sounds like this, as we say, there's some big differences there. What are you going to be watching to? Watching for, I should say. What are you paying attention to as the two chambers trying to figure out some common ground in this budget battle?
That's always a great question. The rollout of the budget was very interesting, where on Thursday you had the Senate saying, okay, we're waiting for the House to roll out the budget, so we're going to wait until next week, which would have been this week, to do it. And then the House that same day rolled out its budget relatively unexpectedly. Some reporters said that they had gotten rumors that it was going to happen, and others said it was not going to happen. So usually there's a lot more transparency and knownness about when the budget's going to be released by the House. And then the Senate, of course, released it then the next day, earlier than expected, or at least based off those earlier comments. So we already had some levels of dysfunction with this process. I think what's going to be key is seeing how aligned the chambers can get on these topics. Right now, of course, we've got $1.4 billion roughly separating the two House and Senate budgets. But there's also like those priority differences. And not just in that, by the way, there's a plethora of different differences between these chambers' proposals. For example, the Senate wants to sustain some levels of funding for the Governor Ron DeSantis created Florida State Guard, while the House nixes that funding, which would definitely draw the ire of DeSantis. And DeSantis has so far been relatively quiet about these two proposals. But, you know, I have to imagine what we're looking out for and what we should expect is some level of involvement, of comment, of maybe even tension with some of the lawmakers over these priorities, or that are either aligned with him, or in the case of many of what the House's ideas are doing, opposed to what he wants.
Yeah, okay, yeah, the State Guard's an interesting point. I guess we'll have to wait and see sort of what happens to that force once DeSantis is out of office and the new governor takes on that role. But that's something to keep in mind for next year. Let me turn now to the agricultural bill that we were discussing last week. There were some surprises in that bill, right? The so-called veggie disparagement provision. Here's an update to that.
The goal is to protect Florida farmers and ranchers from intentional economic harm while preserving open dialogue, even if someone's wrong, and in the public discourse.
All right, so that's Fort Myers Republican Jonathan Myers talking about that there. Well, just explain, what is he referring to?
Yeah, so they added an amendment into that bill, which a little bit of exposition about that veggie disparagement clause. It would have expanded food producers' ability to sue for false and malicious claims about its products and practices. A lot of free speech advocates and other critics were concerned that this would be used to chill speech, to silence critics. And that discourse really proliferated, not just the Capitol hallways, but you saw social media blowing up about it. Republicans even at the national scale were weighing in. So at that meeting, we saw an amendment that just nixed that language from the bill. Now, the opposing chamber has not done that yet, but I know there is some skepticism of that provision as well on that side.
Well, it sounds like there's a little bit of some viruses floating around in the air up in Tallahassee, but Valentine's Day just happened. Was love in the air in Tallahassee last week as well?
Love and pollen in the air, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and I was reminded of Valentine's Day because this group of children actually dropped off cards at the Capitol press corps gallery, which is situated in cubicles on a corner of the 4th floor rotunda. And all my other colleagues got very bright and optimistic Valentine's Day cards, like, you rock, you're awesome, you're talented. And mine was, I guess this was a gentle nudge that this is a stage of my life that can be improved. Mine said, this chapter isn't the whole story, which was, I appreciate the gesture of the gift of a card, but it wasn't quite as cheery as the other ones got.
Yeah. Well, Douglas, don't worry. The entire Florida Matters team think you rock, so rest assured in that. WUSF's Douglas Soul, part of the Your Florida team covering the legislature and explaining how laws impact you and your neighbors. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Up next, a gun violence prevention group. Oh, I'm not talking about that one. We're going to talk about something else. That was yesterday. We are going to be talking about threats and investigations to those threats from the FBI Tampa office so far this year. Many of those threats online. Stay tuned for that. How does the FBI investigate threats, and how do you keep yourself safe and be smart online as well? That's when Florida Matters Live and Local continues. Stay with us.
Hey, I'm Gabriella Paul, and I report on people living paycheck to paycheck in the region.
They're firefighters, they're teachers, they're nurses, but they don't make enough money to pay the bills, and they're one paycheck away from being on the street or in some sort of substandard housing.
At WUSF, I tell your stories about the rising cost of living.
Listener support powers WUSF. Funding also comes from Badawi Law, offering legal services in personal injury, immigration, and auto accidents, with offices in Tampa, Florida. Office information and practice details at badawilaw.com or learn more on Instagram at Badawi Law. The 23rd Annual Embracing Our Differences International Art Exhibition celebrates inclusion and kindness. It's free and runs through April 19th outdoors in Sarasota's Bayfront Park. Details are at embracingourdifferences.org.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. There have been over 100 threats investigated by the FBI's Tampa office so far this year, and many of those threats are online. The Federal Bureau of Investigation says it's been seeing an uptick in threats, particularly over social media. Late last year, the Bureau investigated bomb threats against Florida schools. Now, the FBI has a new campaign to help people prevent violence.
Now, we are asking for your help by watching and listening for these signs in your community that are signaling something is wrong.
All right, so here to help us spot those signs to prevent threats and how to be mindful in what we post and share is the leader of the FBI's Tampa Field Office, Special Agent in Charge Matthew Fodor. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Matthew.
So, have you ever encountered a threat online? What would you like to ask our FBI agent about preventing violence? You can join the conversation. The number is 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. You can also send us an email, FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. All right, so I'm just wondering, is there kind of a baseline for how the FBI defines a threat?
Sure. So our purview for investigating threats comes under Federal Statute 18875. And it's very important to pay attention to the parent C. And that's what we usually see when it comes to online threats. It's any threat to injure or kidnap a person over the wire. So over the wire means a mail, could be a telephonic threat, but for more kind of applicability in this society, it's over the internet.
Yeah.
And we see a lot of threats that are being posted by way of Instagram, through social media platforms, just a number of different ways. And unfortunately, that's led to a significant uptick.
How do you kind of keep tabs on all of them? Because there's just so much going on in social media. Like every social media network has its own world, right? So how do you even keep abreast of all this stuff?
So we usually get our tips by way of the public. There's also plenty of folks that refer the threats to us that are just seeing it online, that may be out of state, but predominantly they're the public that generates those tips for us. It is very difficult to siphon through what is legit and what's not, so we have to treat every single one of them as if they're legit threats.
Can you share any recent examples of threats made on social media or in real life that were fake?
Well, I wouldn't say that. So when we get involved, it's usually just not a fake threat. They've committed the crime, because that's the important differentiation, right? We don't. If somebody says, "I'm going to kill Matthew," the crime's been broken at that point. The law's been broken. Excuse me.
So it doesn't matter if they say, "Oh, I was just joking."
That's correct. That's their. So
in some ways, context is not that relevant. It's like the words you say.
It's important when you're in a court setting to help your defense, but by and large, once the crime is committed, it's done.
Yeah. You'd have to specify which Matthew you're talking about in this context too, right?
That's right.
A lot of Matthews on the show today.
There are.
Yeah, but that's not a bad thing. Okay, so I mean, how would somebody know if they've gone too far? Are they going to get a knock on the door from the man in black? Are they going to get a phone call? Like, how does this work?
So the unique thing, especially to Florida, is that we are a very collaborative law enforcement group and community. So it may not be a bureau agent every single time. It may be a police officer or detective, depending on who receives a threat and generally who is going to work it. We have clearly, if the lead comes to us, we will coordinate with our local colleagues and go out there and pay that person a visit. Not all cases there is an arrest that's made because there is clearly sometimes an underlying condition that's associated with it.
Mm-hmm. If you're just joining us on Florida Matters Live and Local, we're talking with Special Agent in Charge Matthew Fodor of the FBI's Tampa Division about the threats of violence made over social media and online. Maybe you've experienced or reported an online threat to law enforcement. If you've got questions about it or you want to weigh in on the conversation, you can tell us by calling 813-755-6562 or you can email FloridaMatters at WUSF.org. So, I mean, if the FBI is involved, what sort of punishment could be hanging over somebody if they have made one of these threats, and you decide, yes, this is a credible threat?
Sure. So it's this. The statute carries a maximum of 5 years. There's sentencing guidelines all over the place that can enhance that. And if there's a kind of a terroristic aspect to it, there's terrorism enhancements that can be sought after a conviction.
Okay, let me ask you that. So what makes something a terroristic enhancement?
So if they did it on behalf of a terrorist organization, for example, and they threatened somebody, and this was done on, for example, ISIS is in furtherance of ISIS, right? Then that could carry a terrorism enhancement post conviction.
Is it hard to kind of prove that, though? Because it seems to me like in a lot of these cases, they're not necessarily acting directly under the influence of one of these groups. They may just be inspired by them.
It's actually not very hard at all to prove that, because we don't just we don't arrest somebody and then close the case. We usually do a tandem search warrant, like a residential search warrant or a electronic search warrant to seize devices that may have been used in the threat. And oftentimes what we encounter is that there was a plan. And there was a plan associated with that threat, and it was much, much more to the story than originally thought.
Now, you've been with the FBI for a while, right? Since 2006, I believe?
That's correct, yep.
So, I mean, the world has changed, right? Online has totally changed the picture there, the way threats are received and perceived and prosecuted. Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So when I came on the FBI, it's funny, I reflect upon this, and I was given a global pager and a StarTech cell phone. And for those listeners that don't know what that is, it's a flip phone.
Wow.
And that's how we were supposed to respond to the calls for duty, which unfortunately happened all hours of the day, all hours of the weekend. Now we're married to our smartphones, but I can tell you, I would characterize that that scenario is kind of the what the internet has transpired to. So when you think about 2006, there was perhaps MySpace account was the equivalent of a Facebook account.
Did you have a MySpace account?
I did not. I have zero social media, quite frankly. So
is that by choice? Or
by
just 'cause
choice.
You don't have time?
By choice. No, by choice. Yeah. Anyway, it's there's a lot of new platforms out there. A lot of platforms. It seems like there's 10 more that are on the internet every single day, and the access to the internet and those types of platforms is just amazing. It's grown exponentially, and I think that is leading to some of the uptick that we've seen in the threat environment.
What about the influence of AI? Like if you have a bot that's just kind of churning out messages, like are there cases where sometimes you're following up a tip and then you realize this is not necessarily a human kind of behind this? This is just kind of a bot that's sort of spawning these things.
I haven't encountered a situation like that, but what I have encountered is seemingly, and you alluded to this earlier about bomb threats that are kind of storming the country in some respects. A lot of those threats emanate overseas, and they disguise their origination through different techniques, but it does take a lot of investigative effort to uncover that.
Yeah.
And we have prosecuted people with our partners overseas that are and trying to hold them accountable for doing this. We have found them. It just takes a little bit extra time.
Is any of them like local? Like, have you been able to trace any of those threats, like you might have seen through schools in the Tampa Bay region, for example, back to somebody overseas?
Yes, we have. However, it's important to note that it's not just in the Tampa area. Usually when that happens, there's several states that got impacted.
Yeah, that's quite strange, isn't it? Like, why is that?
I think they're just trying to create mass chaos, to be honest with you. And what we're finding out is oftentimes it's a juvenile subject. So they're in their teens, bored at home, and this is what they decide to do. They're very, very smart if they just applied themselves, but they choose to apply themselves in making law enforcement's lives miserable.
Okay. We're talking with FBI Special Agent Matthew Fodor about online threats and preventing real ones. Maybe you've noticed an uptick in online threats, or maybe you've changed what and how you post online in the age of online threats and violence. You can join the conversation. Give us a call, 813-755-6562, or you can also email FloridaMatters at WUSF.org. Now, you mentioned kind of the terrorism angle as well. You've got experience in counterterrorism. Lawmakers here want the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to establish a counterintelligence and counterterrorism unit. That's one of the laws that's kind of bills that's floating around. So how would the FBI play a role in that, and how would you see that kind of helping the work you do if it would?
So this is really nothing new for us. We've had joint terrorism task forces in place for a number of years, and post 9/11, a lot of effort's been put into developing those relationships with local law enforcement and state law enforcement officials. So I don't really see a significant change for the FBI. I think it's just added resources, quite frankly, and the state saying, we can be a better partner with you. Here's some more resources and some more paths for disruption that were not available before. So I think it's not a bad thing to have happen. And the same goes for counterintelligence.
Yeah. Coming back to what people should do if they encounter an online threat, like what do you recommend? Is it go to your local law enforcement? How should you respond to something like this?
I would respond by just calling it into any law enforcement agency. If it's a local department, that's fine. And we have 1-800 call FBI is another way to get a tip into law enforcement. So just reporting it is very, very important. We just never know where it's going to lead. A lot of times when we do post-attack analysis, we find that there was an opportunity for a bystander to call in the threat. However, they just resisted the urge or just put it off as just a person acting strange. So be communicative, be aware, and don't be afraid to call in. There's ways to protect you if you're the caller. So.
Now, you've got threat assessment, threat management, TATM teams. You're covering 18 counties, Southwest Florida, Central Florida, Brevard County. What do those teams do?
So we actually, it was an initiative that was started on a national level back in 2018, and it was post-Las Vegas attack. And
is it the shooting?
Yeah,
the
mass shooting. And what it is basically trying to empower local law enforcement to come up with non-traditional disruption techniques. So when you think about a threat that occurs, oftentimes we take the person in custody, case closed, and we're good to go. What we're learning is that we just can't arrest our way out of the problem. And what we're seeing is that a lot of the threats that come across our plates as a law enforcement community, there's sometimes an underlying condition. So for example, for juveniles, right, we have a lot of school threats. Maybe there's a troubled youth growing up in a troubled home. Maybe an arrest isn't the right path, right?
So you're trying to be proactive.
Proactive, right? Preventative, right? Where historically law enforcement has been very reactive. We had come in after the fact, and we do a fine job at neutralizing threats on active shooters, but trying to get in the preventative space is very, very difficult, and it's a community whole of government effort to get that done. And your state and your local community here, local law enforcement community, is one of the best I've seen in the 5 field offices I've been in. So, tremendous partnerships, tremendous support for the initiative. I want to name a few here: Collier County, Lee County, Pasco, Pinellas, Hillsborough, Polk, Orange, Seminole have all contributed to the threat management initiative in this region. As you mentioned, there's 18 counties.
Yeah.
There's 118 different departments that are contained within that county, in those counties. So a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of collaboration on a very continuous basis.
Yeah, a lot of coordination involved there. Just before we close out here, Matthew, so whenever there's a big national case, I wonder if that sort of like complicates things a bit for you. Do you find sort of people just flooding your phone lines with tips? Like I'm thinking of the Savannah Guthrie case. Are you having to sort of field a lot of stuff from that and forward it elsewhere? So
I think a lot of folks don't quite understand where the FBI can play an important role in those types of investigations. We definitely play more of a support role. We have the one, I would say probably the biggest benefit of being in the FBI is the amount of resources that we can surge towards a crisis at any given time.
Yeah.
We're 38,000 strong, and what you're seeing in Arizona is just a cumulative effort with the local law enforcement agents and the federal government. So similar to the threat assessment and threat management initiatives, that's 48 field offices that are spearheading this. We've established 189 teams across the country so far just between our collaborative efforts. So you're seeing that that collaboration and that amount of resources being surged in this area, because we do think that it really will result in some preventions.
Wow, that's an awful lot of resources. Well, thank you so much. And I should note of clarification that Nancy Guthrie, of course, the mom of NBC Savannah Guthrie. But I want to thank you very much, FBI Special Agent in charge of the Tampa Field Office, Matthew Fodor. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate it.
Well, coming up next, School of Rock, we'll talk to a University of Florida music professor who's written a book about Gainesville's punk rock scene and his city's punk legacy. That's when Florida Matters Live and Local continues. Stay with us.
I'm Scott Tong. With the recent demise of the Washington Post book section, where can readers go for suggestions? We ask our go-to book podcaster, Tracy Thomas.
I think the place that is so surprisingly great is Elle Magazine, especially for people who are readers who maybe aren't quote-unquote into books.
Next time, Here and Now.
Join us this afternoon from 1 to 3 on WUSF 89.7.
Funding for WUSF comes from listeners like you, and also AmScot, a state and federally regulated financial services provider, proud supporters of NPR. Learn more about their services and their commitment to the communities they serve at amscot.com. The Palladium at SPC presents a New York jazz connection as two powerhouse performers join forces this Saturday. Allison Briggs with her all-star band and Grammy-nominated pianist and vocalist Judy Carmichael. More at mypalladium.org.
WUSF brings you the voices of people working to fight climate change, including some young volunteers who planted a microforest.
All right, let's see. Do we need to put some more dirt in here? What do you think?
I already got a lot of that.
Oh, good.
When you hear about how people are growing new biodiversity hotspots, your perspective also grows. You can support the work of journalists in the WUSF newsroom at WUSF.org.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. Well, Gainesville has a rich musical history. Tom Petty may be the city's best-known musical troubadour. There's also Bo Diddley, the rock and roll pioneer who settled in Archer near Gainesville in the 80s. The city also has deep punk rock roots as well. In the 90s, bands to pogo their way from the college crowds of Gainesville to the national stage include Less Than Jake. And Against Me. And before them, there were groups like this one to pave the way. That is Roach Motel, a band whose very first gig in the early 80s got cancelled even before they'd plugged in their amps. Well, here with some liner notes to Gainesville's punk scene and its history is Matt Walker. He's the author of Gainesville Punk, History of Bands and Music, and he's one of the instructors of a University of Florida course, Gainesville Punk, A History of a City and a Scene. Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me here.
And if you've got a story to share about Gainesville's punk scene, you can call and tell us about it. The number is 813-755-6562. You can also email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Matt, you moved to Gainesville in the mid-2000s, so let's start there. What was happening in the punk scene, and what did you know about the city's association with punk music before you arrived?
Well, I kind of grew up in South Georgia in the 90s, so Gainesville's punk scene was pretty established and pretty rich by the 1990s, I think. So it kind of made its way up to where I was in Georgia. So I used to come down here in the late 90s to go see shows and whatnot. And then I had an opportunity I decided to apply to graduate school. So I applied to UF to come live here. And that was the hope, to kind of go to school for grad school at UF and to be able to kind of be closer to the music scene here and be able to participate in it and just kind of be a part of all what was going on. I think at the time, in my memory, I think Against Me was kind of probably one of the bigger bands that was kind of had made its way out of Gainesville at the time. It was kind of carrying the punk rock torch through the country around those years.
Yeah. So what do you remember about some of those gigs? Like anything really stand out? Do you remember the first gig you went to in Gainesville, for example?
The very first one I went to was one of those in the late '90s at the original Hardback Cafe, which was host to so many kind of legendary punk shows at the time. And I came down here with some friends and saw, I think it must have been 1997 or 1998, and saw Hot Water Music, which is of course from Gainesville, along with a band called Grade from Canada and Drag Body from Orlando. So it was a packed, sweaty show. And then when I moved here, some years later, it was pretty similar. I mean, there were shows just about every night of the week. If you wanted to go out, there was always some punk or DIY bands to see. Just really active scene, just continually through the years, it seems like.
Yeah. How's your hearing? You got any hearing loss? Everything okay up there?
I have a little bit of ringing in my ears, but I've learned in more recent years to wear earplugs to shows, which I didn't do when I was younger.
Yeah. And you are in a band at the moment. A band is called Orbiter. Let's just take a listen to a track called Cicada Hymn. So one review described this as something between shoegaze, post-rock, sludge, and indie rock. So it's not punk, obviously, but do you sort of see yourself as drawing on Gainesville's punk legacy in some way with the music you're making at the moment?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, all of the members of the band have played in like various Gainesville punk bands over the years, from Escape Grace to Whiskey and Company, which is like a country band, but it's kind of a punk DIY band as well. And Abercue, we all kind of come from like a punk foundation, I guess. So we kind of think of this band as kind of operating along those lines, even if it doesn't sound like, fast, aggressive punk rock, it's still, music that kind of lives in the fringes, I think.
Mm-hmm. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Matt Walker. He's the author of Gainesville Punk, A History of Bands and Music. And he's one of the instructors for a course at UF about the city's punk scene. If you want to join the conversation, maybe you as well made the pilgrimage to see punk bands play in Gainesville over the years. The number is 813-755-6562. You can also email FloridaMatters at WUSF.org. All right, so tell me about this course. You're not teaching it this year, but I believe it's going to be back next year. How did this whole thing evolve?
Yeah. After the book that you mentioned came out, I was at it was a few years ago. I was at the Fest, the annual punk festival here in Gainesville that brings bands from all over the place. I was at a show at the Fest and I saw a friend of mine, Reagan Garner, and I've known her through the music scene for years, but she also works at University of Florida as the associate director of the honors program, and they have various elective courses that they can take as part of their requirements. But we were at a show at the Fest and she asked if I might be interested in partnering with her to teach a class based on the book. And so it sounded like a great idea, and we got together and talked about how to kind of base it off the book, but also add some more to it. So the class itself uses the book as kind of the foundation, but we also have opportunities for the students to kind of like go out and explore Gainesville and see where the venues are. We offer extra credit if they volunteer for the fest. So we kind of, hopefully it's like a history of the Gainesville punk scene, but also an introduction to the city and kind of what Gainesville has to offer outside the boundaries of the University of Florida campus.
Are any of those venues that you went to back in the day still around, or have they kind of changed over the years?
The main one that I'd come down to, the Hardback Cafe, closed in the late '90s, but it actually reopened in a couple of variations in the past like 10 years in other places, but it's now closed. But I will say where the original Hardback Cafe was located is now where the restaurant Boca Fiesta is located, which is co-owned by Warren Oakes, who played in Against Me. So there's like still a connection to the punk scene, and they offer both hardback and softback tacos as kind of an homage to it as well.
So people who are in the know what they're ordering there.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So, I mean, is it sort of like, you think about other cities like New York City, of course. You think like CBGB in the East Village was the hardback, so the equivalent in Gainesville, a place where it really sort of helped foster the development of this music?
Yeah, I think so. And, from what I understand about CBGB, the idea behind that was just to offer a place for people to play music and express themselves, no matter what it was. And it kind of turned into like a hub for the punk scene there in New York. And I think the hardback was similar because the original owner, Alan Bushnell, started it with the same kind of thing in mind. He just wanted to offer a place for bands to play original music and to be creative. So at that time, it attracted a lot of these, punk bands that were, weren't necessarily likely to get booked at other, maybe other more polished venues and whatnot. And he had, 7 days a week you could come play. So it kind of became the go-to place. I think, it was that definitely the CBGBs of Gainesville, I guess, at the time.
Yeah. Now, as part of the course, you've also got mixtape assignments. I'm just wondering how that works for a generation that's grown up with digital music as opposed to creating actual mixtapes with cassettes.
Right. Well, we actually we call them mixtapes, but they access the playlist through YouTube. But we do talk about in the course like how people listen to music differently. Like that comes up a lot, how people consume music, 40 years ago, 30 years ago compared to today. But we did use YouTube because there's so many different platforms now. Some of the bands from Gainesville, that aren't active anymore, or who are from the early 80s or something, might not have like a Spotify or an iTunes, an Apple Music presence. So a lot of that stuff can be found on YouTube. So that's why we use YouTube. But yeah, we still call it mixtapes. I feel like it kind of adds to the fun of it. And the students actually, write a little bit about some of the songs that stood out to them and what they liked or didn't like about it and things like that too.
Now, you're also part of a committee working to establish a Gainesville Walk of Fame honoring the city's most influential musicians. Where does punk fit into that Walk of Fame?
Well, I think it definitely is a big part of the Gainesville music scene. In the past couple of years, past few years, the city has awarded Laura Jane Grace from Against Me, as well as Hot Water Music, a key to the city. So I think punk's legacy is definitely recognized in Gainesville. And with the Walk of Fame, the Walk of Fame is really meant to, help amplify the legacies of some of these great musicians, like you mentioned, Tom Petty and, some members from the Eagles like grew up here. And, we have a lot of great musicians who are from or associated with Gainesville. So the Walk of Fame is intended to recognize all that, including, the punk rock presence as well. Even though we haven't announced any list of like nominees yet, I think once this project gets off the ground a little bit more, there will definitely be like a punk presence represented in it.
Yeah. As we close out here, Matt, is there some irony to you? I mean, punk has this whole kind of counterculture DIY spirit. So a Walk of Fame, a college course, this sort of respectability about it. Do you sort of reflect on that sometimes about the journey that punk's taken and where you are in it?
Yeah, it is kind of, funny because you think of it as this like kind of DIY underground culture. But it does bubble up to the mainstream in some ways. But really, like, for me, it's not necessarily just about, keeping it a secret or keeping it all to myself, but a lot of it is about the DIY mindset and lifestyle that comes with it, and just thinking about things maybe outside the box and coming at things from a different direction, and, supporting art, So it's not always about keeping it away from the mainstream, but maybe when it gets some more notoriety, to be sure to kind of frame it with those things in mind.
Yeah. Just before we close out here, email from Raphael in Lakeland. Sister Hazel is a band that should be mentioned as well. So adding that note. Thank you so much, Raphael. And thank you, Matt Walker, author of Gainesville Punk, A History of Bands and Music, and one of the instructors for a course at UF about the city's punk scene. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's our show for today. Tomorrow on Florida Matters, live and local, e-bikes are a popular way to get around, but how safe are they? Lawmakers are considering new safety regulations. We'll talk about them, and we want to hear from you. Are you an e-bike rider? Do you have safety concerns? Stay with us for Florida Matters Live and Local. That's coming your way on noon tomorrow. You can tune in on YouTube, online, and 89.7 as well. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you tomorrow.